Deposit refund policy for electronics in Vermont. Electronic waste, or e-waste, includes any outdated or broken electronic device that you no longer use. Cell phones, computers, laptops, TVs, and printers all make the list, and just about everyone has at least one of these stashed away in a closet or a dresser drawer. The majority of these devices ultimately end up in landfills or are incinerated, making a major environmental impact. Yet e-waste is increasing. With new, better gadgets coming out every year, people are tossing out more electronic devices than ever. Just how bad is the e-waste problem? The United States alone produces up to 50 million tons of e-waste. Of this, only 20 to 25% are recycled safely, while the other 75% end up in landfills. These electronic devices have precious metals in them that could be better utilized if they are disposed of properly. Electronic devices contain materials that are extremely hazardous, such as lead, mercury, and cadmium. Sure, they're safe enough for us to use, but once they're either tossed into landfills or destroyed, the real threat begins. These harmful chemicals seep into the soil when it rains and are released into the atmosphere when devices are burned, negatively impacting the health of plants, animals, and people. For example, respiratory problems such as asthma are on the rise due to an increase in air pollution. Also, mercury can damage your kidney, brain, and central nervous system. E-waste represents 2% of materials in landfills, but accounts for more than 70% of the toxic waste. It was totaled that about 133,000 computers are being discarded every day, and that number is rising. What we can do to reduce the impact of e-waste in Vermont is to put a policy in place that will give consumers an incentive to recycle their outdated or broken devices. With some sort of incentive, such as a refund on a deposit, people will actually want to recycle their e-waste. This can in turn allow e-waste to be properly disposed of, or even better, reused for new or different electronic devices in what is called a closed-loop supply chain. A deposit refund system combines a tax on product consumption with a rebate when the product or its packaging is returned for recycling. By imposing an upfront fee on consumption and subsidizing green inputs and mitigation activities, a deposit refund may be able to efficiently control pollution. An upstream deposit refund is at which the processors or collectors of recyclables rather than consumers receive the fund. Upstream systems may have lower transaction costs and better environmental outcomes than traditional downstream systems. Downstream deposit refunds are when the consumer places down the deposit when purchasing the electronic device and gets refunded when the electronic device is returned back to the producer or manufacturer. The policy I am proposing to help reduce e-waste is a hybrid upstream deposit refund e-waste policy. This policy would state that a down deposit would be imposed on any electronic device to the consumer and will receive a partial refund upon the return of the outdated or broken device after its useful life. The other part of the refund would go to a collection agency that would go around and collect the device at the consumer's home upon request. The deposit and refund imposed on the consumer would be based off the tonnage of the electronic device. To help with people just leaving around broken devices that are lying in drawers, I propose that the producer would keep records of when people purchase their electronic device and be able to call the consumer after an estimated device's useful life to ask if they want their device to be picked up. The producer would have to mark time of purchase, item being purchased, and personal information like name and phone number of the consumer, and then send the information over to the collection agency's website. I am also proposing that the collection service team up with either FedEx or USPS to allow consumers to ship their small devices back to the collection agency paid for by the collection agency's fund from the refunds. So the consumer has the option of shipping in small e-waste devices or having the collection agency pick it up for larger devices such as printers, desktops, and TVs. After the device has been picked up by the agency would then disassemble the products and sell the useful parts for cheap back to the manufacturer to reuse its parts. This is known as a closed-loop supply chain. Electronics have precious metals in them that could save the manufacturer a lot of money of reusing these metals and not having to purchase more. Closed-loop systems can boost a company's profit while increasing the used product return rate at the same time, with the ultimate goal being zero waste to landfills. Also, things such as screens on TVs, phones, or computer monitors could also be reused on new products. The parts that can't be used would then be properly recycled by the collection agency in an environmentally sound location. Who benefits from this policy? Every party involved would benefit. The consumer gets part of their refund back as well as getting rid of their broken or unused device without having to leave their house or put in any effort besides calling the collection agency or just shipping out their small e-waste product. The collection service benefits by not only providing a good service of getting rid of people's electronic devices and bringing them to a place to be properly managed or disposed of, but they also will get money from partial refunds from the consumer's deposit as well as money from the manufacturer for the e-waste parts. This idea would also stimulate the economy by helping to create jobs within Vermont. The manufacturer benefits by being able to get their expensive electronic equipment back for cheap and using the old parts towards newer devices that they can then resell. Once the process is implemented, it would save the manufacturer a lot of money by not having to purchase new parts. Lastly, and most importantly, everyone benefits by helping to save the environment and keeping our planet clean. There are hindrances in this plan, but they could be easily solved. The first hindrance would be a monopolistic collection service. I'd assume that people would want to start their own collection service of electronic e-waste to be paid in part by the refund of the consumer. However, I believe that Vermont is a small enough state with a low population of people that only one collection service should be implemented. If the state goes ahead with this plan, it would only back one collection service. A second hindrance would be that manufacturers don't want to implement a plan to reuse e-waste because it might cost them time and money that they could be spending elsewhere. A solution to this would be a requirement in this policy of extended producer responsibility. Manufacturers should have to use parts that are reusable. Also, I believe the manufacturers would want to reuse materials such as precious metals because they are expensive and would not want to repurchase them. According to Getting to Grips with Take-Back laws, that by refurbishing old parts and materials, it can represent a cost saving of between 40 and 65%. Hopefully, the materials being used from the e-waste would exceed the cost of implementation. A third hindrance would be that consumers might want their whole deposit back instead of just in part. The solution would be that by providing the extra service or pickup and paying for the mail charges, the consumer would be fine with only getting part of their refund back. This project would need a startup fund from the state treasury to get the website up and running and higher initial costs of the collection agency. After that, the act would be self-sustained through the deposits from the consumer, which would go towards the pay of the collection service, as well as revenue coming in from selling parts to the manufacturers. The initial costs of the collection service would include special tools to take apart the devices and a small factory setting to use as a workspace. After that, operational costs would include the collector's payroll, device disassemblers' payroll, gas money for the collectors to drive from the homes to the factory to the manufacturer's location, and paying for USPS shipments from the consumer to the collection agency. Budgeting it out correctly and finding a good percentage of refund between the consumer and the collection service will raise enough revenue to support these expenses. Some downside to this plan that cannot be overcome is that the producer and manufacturers have no incentive to create longer useful lives of the electronic device and also to not create environmentally sound packaging. By trying to implement these ideas, the companies would lose money. The only solution to this would be switching to an extended individual producer responsibility plan. These ideas have been established in Europe through the WE directive and have varied from country to country in how they carry out this directive. The directive states, users of electrical and electronic equipment from private households should have the possibility of returning at least free of charge. Manufacturers are also required to dispose of, recycle, or refurbish equipment in an ecological manner. My idea varies slightly in that not all the responsibility is only on the manufacturer, but rather employs a collection service that would help the manufacturers out in reselling them used parts for cheap. Also, consumers will have incentive to actually recycle because of the refund they will be getting back. Cyprus has implemented companies importing or retailing electronic equipment to register with the environmental service, which has worked for them. Also, Ireland has a law that requires producer and distributors of electronic equipment to register with the We Register Society and join a compliance scheme to help meet their collection, recycling, and reporting requirements. This is similar to my idea in that to successfully track where the electronic producers need to register the consumer with personal information and device information about the product into the collection services website. My idea also incorporates some of the ideas of Japan's solution to electronic waste. Instead of a 3-step process of paying a fee, getting old materials hauled away, and disposing of them along environmental regulations, Japan's plan has the producer or manufacturer take back, dismantle, and reuse the material to create new products. Also in the Japan model, the electronic producers teamed up with the postal service so people could effectively return their electronic waste back to them. In California, they incorporated an advanced state recovery fee. These fees were then put into a state recycling fund that reimbursed recyclers. According to state waste and recycling data, California generated approximately 140,000 tons of covered electrical devices in 2005, with more than 60 million pounds of this electronic waste taken back for recycling through the program. In 2006, this number rose to more than 120 million tons recycled. Also, California paid out $61 million in reimbursement to recyclers in 2006. Overall, with very little cost, ease of implementation, and what would be a tremendous outcome, I can see no reason why this idea would not be implemented immediately. Saving the environment is becoming such a great concern to everyone around the world. Our great state of Vermont should lead the way in finding alternatives to disposing of this very toxic electronic waste.